action. Welcome to the Rumikay Talks podcast, and today I'm excited to interview Federico Mallet. Federico, welcome.
Hey, Constantine. Thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure to share space with you. Thank you.
Of course. Long time no see.
Yes, context. You were both, Constantine, you and Rum and I were just in New York, where it's my home base, and we got to spend a lovely couple hours together, which was really, really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice time at the Brooklyn Bridge Park, looking at the New York City.
Exactly.
Just chatting and relaxing. Yeah, that was amazing.
That's right. And I have to say, inspiring. It's always great to be around go-getters like yourself and people who make things happen, you know, because it's contagious, right? It's so important to surround yourself with people who put their money where their mouth is, and you two are certainly that. So it was inspiring too. Yeah.
Thank you. How are things in New York now since we left? What changed within the last few days?
Well, I mean, I guess not much has changed, right? As much things have evolved in terms of project and whatnot. But this time of year is definitely a lot more active, right, than the beginning of the year, which is always a little slow. I think in the industry, we can all agree that January is a little, particularly this year, right, after strikes and such. But things are better now. It's things are moving. Yeah.
Glad to hear that, because we're going to dive in all sorts of questions today. But let's start from the beginning. Where did it all begin? Let's talk about the moment in your life when you decided, okay, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to pursue the career in acting.
It was right as I was graduating from college in Mexico City. I studied, my major was in media and communications with a minor in theater. And I was, ever since high school, I was always involved in the school plays and in college as well. We did a bunch of productions. And when I graduated and it was time for me to look for a job, and I was through the job interview process, I found that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep for several days. My sleep was being interrupted with thoughts of like, that was it. If I get an office job, as I know I'm supposed to, that'll be it with acting. That'll be it with my artistic life. I won't have enough time for it other than maybe perhaps as a hobby on the weekends or something. So because I couldn't sleep, I was like, this can't go on like this. Just for your peace of mind, just Google for 5 minutes acting school and see what happens. And it happens that I saw auditions for the New York Film Academy in 3 days in Mexico City. And I was like, I don't have time to think. This just calls me and I'm going to prepare to do it. I'll prepare my monologues. And I always say that time was on my side, because if it had been in 2 weeks or a month, I would have pushed it aside and said, like, you need to focus on finding a job. But because it was so soon, I didn't have time to think. And I just did it. And it was so funny because I remember the reason why I studied media and communications and the reason why I felt like this can't be a real job is because I was brought up with this notion that you can't make a living out of a career in the arts, right? That's fine for a hobby, but you can't, like, it's true with a lot of people who study media, I think. You study media and communications because it's the closest thing to the arts, but it has a respectability to it, right? It has like you have a shot at the enterprise world, I guess, right? So it's funny because when I went audition for the school, when my parents told me, like, where are you going? And I was like, to a job interview. That's how much it was like, I know I'm not supposed to be doing this, right? But because I got in and I got a scholarship, then it was the answer. It was like the push I needed. And it was like, no, this is my life. This is what my life is going to be, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, no matter what I need to do, what I need to compromise. It became that clear. And it always was. Since I was a kid, I think it always was clear that this was supposed to be my life. But there was so many factors clouding my judgment and my clarity. So this admission, this yes from this audition just made it crystal clear. And then, yeah, that's the moment.
Nice. Before that moment, were there any thing that you watched, a play or a movie or a particular actor that kind of seeded that idea in you and or maybe even some people saying something, just like one word or like a random line that someone said, and it kind of like stuck in your head as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. That has been true throughout my life, right? Ever since I have memories of being at the movie theater at age 2.
Oh wow.
So of being that level of being impacted, right? My first memory of seeing a movie on the big screen was Hocus Pocus at 93. I was 3 years old, and yeah, I just remember feeling like alive. And I've always felt like the movie theater is my home. I always feel at home. Same with the theater. It's a level of comfort, and the level of companionship that movies growing up, like Disney movies, all sorts of movies, provided to me was such a sacred thing. So I always had this notion of like, this is me. This is where I see myself. This is special. Yeah, yeah. But it was true throughout my life.
Nice. Is there a particular book that you could mention that kind of started your journey, your education as an actor, or maybe a play?
I've always liked fiction because I love storytelling. Traditional storytelling is where I'm most, it's what I'm most attracted to, like traditional fiction storytelling. So yes, plays I've always loved. Tennessee Williams is a particular favorite of mine. So his plays I always find so groundbreaking, and so they shake me to the core. So that always excited me so. And then just traditional novels that are very cinematic in my mind, like just in high school reading like The Great Gatsby or Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, all those where I could really paint a picture, and I'm very visual, so it was very storytelling. So that's as far as books and plays, I would say Tennessee Williams is an inspiration for sure.
So let's talk about your transition from Mexico to New York. How did you decide to, well, you found a school, New York Film Academy, but it's not just about the school, it's about moving to a whole other country. It must be a very big shift in your life and a big decision to make, maybe even more so than choosing acting as your profession. So how was this transition? What were the main challenges and how did you overcome them?
I think what clarified is that I had the opportunity while in college, my previous to last semester, I did an exchange program in New York City at Fordham University. So I got to live for an entire semester in New York and see what that was like. And I felt like a symbiosis, like a we're one and the same with the city, because it really solidified a strong sense of self. I was quite alone during that semester because all of my classmates had already, it was advanced classes, so they all had friends already. The cliques were established, right? So I was by myself a lot of that semester. Not a lot of friendships came out of that. I mean, I had good relationships in class, but outside of class, I was mostly exploring the city by myself. And to learn that this city made it possible for you to have just a great time with yourself, right? That's when I learned like I could take myself out on dates, and that I could have a blast with myself, that I could be a good companion for myself, and that was okay, and that the city allowed me to enjoy my own company because of all the cultural offers and everything, that you were so stimulated. So it's as corny as it sounds, I kind of like became my own best friend during that semester abroad. And so because I had such a strong relationships to the city, because of what it made me learn about myself, I knew I wanted to come back because I really felt very strong in the city. I felt uplifted and I felt stronger. So that was kind of like the precursor of my decision to choose, like, it's not like I wanted to do acting anywhere, right? It was specifically in New York City. And you know what? The transition was easy because it continued to be encouraging. Now I had great friends in school. I had so much luck at the New York Film Academy. My group was like this, right? We were just like completely supportive of each other. We continued to uplift each other. We hanged out all the time outside of school. And my teachers in particular, to see people who made a living out of acting after a lifetime of hearing that's not possible, it's not a career. And to see that my teachers all did that and just that, right? It was so uplifting. So it was an easy transition. In fact, I was very lucky because it felt very uplifting, and it's not the case for a lot of people. New York can be a city. It's kind of isolating, but it can have a negative effect on you. But I was lucky enough to have all these support systems and to be doing what I loved every day, all day, right? Which was to me was unparalleled. So it was an easy transition. Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. And what do you gravitate towards more, theater or films, in terms of choosing projects?
I would say I love them equally. New York has given me a lot more of theater experience.
Yeah.
It's funny because technically I went to school for film acting, right? Even though I'd done a lot of stage back home, and but all of my first gigs, all of the things I was being hired for was theater. So now I have considerably more experience doing stage than film. Although I've also done film, but I'd say I wouldn't be able to say that I prefer one over the other. I love being at rehearsal and I love being backstage as much as I love being on set. So
what do you think it's easier to produce, a theater play or let's say a short film?
Theater play, 100%.
All right.
Which is why, yes. You need so much less. Like a theater could be street theater. You could act out in a park and people rather around, and it could be anywhere, right? And for film, you can't do without. I mean, now it's more democratic. Now people have phones and phones with quality, and there's ways, right? When there's a will, there's a way.
Do you need permits in New York City to just perform in the park, as you said?
You know what? Sometimes and sometimes not. I think that there's like particular groups that come every summer, and there's certain areas of Central Park or Prospect Park where they perform, and it is a pact between the park and the company, although it's regularly easy. And sometimes I've been a part of a group that we just go and all we did was like random people who were sitting there. It's like, would you like to hear a sonnet? And then they selected the theme and we said a Shakespeare sonnet, so that's, and people perform on the subway platforms, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah, I'm always wondering whether they get some kind of permit or they just like randomly enter and exit.
Yes. Well, there's everything, right? But a lot of times you see great singers, sometimes opera singers, right? Incredible musicians on the subway platform. There is a way to sign up and get a particular, so that they don't compete, right? Because otherwise there'd be like 3 or 4 at the same time. So you do get time slots in which you're able to perform. Yeah.
Nice. Have you tried any of that on New York City subway?
No, my closest, although it's so fun because I've seen this video, perhaps viewers have seen it as well, of a company that did Rent the musical uninterruptedly inside a subway car. So it doesn't matter if people walked in and out, they saw different sections of the show, but it just kept going from Brooklyn all the way into Manhattan and Queens. It was like the entire show. So, but I haven't been a part of something like that, except what I shared with you with is like Central Park with a company called Theater for the People, where we grab the Shakespeare monologue and a sonnet really, and then add our own writings into it. So it was like combine Shakespeare with ourselves, and that's what we performed at Central Park. But that's the closest I've been to that. Yeah.
Nice. So what's the acting scene in New York City like right now? What are the main challenges? What are the good parts of it? Let's say as opposed to Mexico, because have you been to Los Angeles? Have you been acting in Los Angeles before?
Well, and I think that, that's where we met, right? Because I after a year of studying in New York City, I saw the opportunity. Well, I was advised to get my degree, and in order to do that, I had to go to LA. So I finished my program in LA, and then I worked there for a little bit. I do think LA is overall so much more focused. There's so much more competition, even though in New York there's a lot of competition, but LA is so film focused, right? That it's very normal to be at a coffee shop and hear constant conversations about film, wherever you go, right? It seems like it's the town for that. And a lot of people say if you're into film, you have to be in LA. So I'm glad I experienced it. Um, and I think, I mean, I know these are cliches. I did find them a little bit to be true from like teachers or casting directors or anything, that in LA people are just a lot more like, oh yeah, that's great. Okay, that's great. We'll let you know. There's so much more easy, and in New York it'll be like very matter of fact, right? No sugarcoating. Let's put it like that. Um, so I guess LA is a lot more about relationships. It seems to me, or at least relationships are spoken a lot more about. Of just like, who do you know? I'll introduce you to this person and this person, and you know, we both know that it is about relationships, right? A lot of the time, it's about who you know and who's gonna get you in the room. But it seemed to me in my short time in LA that that was more present there than in New York City. So I guess that's a small comparison that I could make.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. In LA, actually, I started to, I always thought this is mostly film scene and filmmaking and stuff. But I actually started discovering a lot of plays, visiting theaters, Geffen Playhouse, some smaller theaters. Like our friends invite us to their place. We come watch them. It is a unique experience. It does remind me a little bit in New York once you're inside the theater. But the thing is about LA, it's like everything you kind of have to search for. You have to look for and find places.
Yeah.
Because in New York, you kind of can just walk down the streets and then see some theater and then, oh, maybe I should go there one day. In New York, in LA, you need to really research or like have friends who are performing. And yeah, but there are a lot of small theaters to like do small productions and, mono plays and things like that.
That a lot of my teachers in LA were doing theater, right? So I often went to see them doing shows, and they were really great. But I think that it is a lot less than in New York City, right? In New York City, I always joke that you could be walking down the street and you bang on the floor and then a door opens and it's a theater, right? Or it's like you open the refrigerator and they're doing a play, It's like that is to that level in New York City of like, there's theaters everywhere, right? And in LA, that's not so much the case. I think that you do need to look more, like you said.
So what do you love about New York City? What makes you stay there? What makes you just, I'm going to be here. I'm not going to LA or I'm not going anywhere else. I like the scene here. What are those things that kind of keep you there?
I really do think that the city that never sleeps is true for me. It keeps me motivated because there's such a sense of motion. And sometimes that's funny because that's what overwhelms some people, right? But there's such a sense of motion and possibility. And I always say you can visit New York a million times and it's never going to be the same because there's always something new to see. There's always some sort of new place they've invented or new exhibit or new show or new anything, right? New skylight, new everything. So to me, knowing that, because I have a zest for that, like knowing that on a Wednesday night I could go see a show, or on a Monday morning midday I could be an exhibit. It's just like, it doesn't matter what day of the week. I grew up used to, that's the weekends. The weekends is for stuff. Everything else is just, there's nothing, right? And in New York, every day is the weekend, so to speak. Because it doesn't matter what your schedule is, you'll always find something cultural available, which is what keeps me going. That's very motivating to me. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of walking, a lot of subway. We actually looked at our steps after we visited New York because we're working like 12 hours a day. 30,000 steps every day.
Yeah.
We set new records.
It's a new record for yourself.
In LA, the maximum I think was 20,000. 30,000 steps is like half marathon.
It's famous for hiking, but also, yeah. And LA, there's so much hiking that happens, but I feel it's also because people spend so much time in a car, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't hike to work, know.
Yeah, but New York, that's also for me. That's also it. In all honesty, it's so easy to move. For me, being in a car is not the best, right? I don't enjoy it. Especially with traffic, and I like the it's like, okay, the subway's messed up, I can just walk out and run 20 blocks and I'll still make it. You know, it's very, I think it's easier to move. I like not being dependent on a car.
Mm-hmm.
So it would look like a small thing, but it is a big deal that I don't have to use a car to get everywhere. And the subway is so well connected. The
Yeah.
MTA gets a lot of people criticize it a lot, but I do think it's one of the greatest in the world. That it runs
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
24 hours, even if it's messed up. It could be 3 a.m. and you know you're gonna get home eventually.
Yeah.
You know, but you'll get home. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, in LA, it's like non-existent. You see subways, you see buses, but when it comes to using them, it's like it takes 20 minutes by car and then 2 hours by public transportation.
Yes.
It's insane.
No,
It's insane.
I think that's what it's one of the factors that made me like, okay, maybe this is not working out in LA, because when I was working and auditioning, if I was living in Burbank and I had an audition in Santa Monica, it was 2 hours and 30 minutes. You know? So I was exhausted by the time the audition is, then you're in the audition room for 10 minutes and then another 2 hours and 30 minutes. And if you miss the bus, it's another hour until the next bus. It's not like 15 minutes. You know? It's so, yeah.
And
It's
sometimes
a car.
it never
It's
comes.
a car. Exactly. Exactly. So it's a car. It's a car city for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about Village Playback Theater. So how did you become a member and how did you become their assistant artistic director in that theater?
So Village Playback Theater is an applied theater company that has been around for over 20 years now. And the Randy Mulder, the founder and director, it is a company in which audiences are invited to share their experiences, their stories, and the performers play those stories back for the audiences. So through improvisation. So it's not improv, right? Because it's not like the classical improv we're used to, like give me a noun, give me a verb. But it is, instead of asking for words, we ask for personal stories. So it is community building, it is theater, but it is the social aspect that's so important, right? Because we go, particularly our company, we go to rehab centers, community centers, hospitals, prisons, places where people don't necessarily get to tell their stories very often or to see their stories represented. So we focus on going to those audiences and giving them the opportunity to kind of like tell their story, see it come to life as a way of like, yeah, your story matters, right? Your story should be told. Your story should be heard. Your story should be art, should be uplifted, right? So it's quite something. The velocity of the connections that are formed is incredible because it is our job to make people feel comfortable enough to share something personal and deep, right? So often shows will start with us sharing something personal about ourselves so that people can go like, okay, if they're sharing, I can share, right? And so we have like in improv, we have all these different forms. There's short forms, there's medium forms, and there's long forms as the show progresses. And you know it because you were at one virtual show during the pandemic. Yeah. And the way I got involved, it's like in any audition. I found the audition on Backstage, and it was quite a rigorous audition process because they don't only have to make sure that about your technique and about your experience as an actor and your creativity, but also that you're interested in this type of work, right? That you have sort of like an interest in social justice and an interest in creating community. So it's not for everyone, right? It's not like an regular acting gig. And yeah, it's going to be my 10th anniversary this year in the summer. So yeah,
10 years.
It's special. 10 years. Yes.
Wow. That's amazing. Yes. It's almost like 1/10 of your life, so to speak.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's quite special.
Is there any particular moments that you remember from those 10 years that you performed at Village Playback Theater that stand out? You'd like to mention any particular, audience's reaction or anything that related to the theater?
Oh, absolutely. There's many, right? And they're meaningful a lot of the time. I think the one that really sticks out to me very early on is we got the opportunity again to go to these community centers where people are dealing with mental illness, and they have support groups and things like that, right? So that you get to hear a lot of difficult stories during these shows. And I was there's for the longer stories, the storyteller get to choose one of the actors to play them in their story, right? So they have a sense of ownership of like, you should be me and you should be my mom and you should be kind of thing, right? So I was chosen to be a man who was sharing a story about child abuse, right? So that was I felt a lot of weight on my shoulders of just like getting it right. And of course, we're not going to reenact the traumatic parts, right? We use either metaphor, or we work with fabric or dance or song to kind of like get through that. But I'll never forget the man who shared his story had such a hard time watching it. He had his face down for most of the performance when we were enacting his story. But at the end, he just approached me and shook my hand so firmly, and we didn't say anything, but for a good minute or two, we were just shaking hands. And nothing needed to be said. You know, it was like a mutual thank you of thank you for sharing, thank you for listening kind of thing. And that's when I understood how powerful this could be. So that's just an example of the importance of seeing yourself, right? Of seeing like, I'm being listened to, I'm being respected, I'm being honored, my story matters. It ended, I was able to share it, no one's judging me. All those things are so important, right? Yeah. And I feel all storytelling should be like that, hopefully. Yeah,
I like this idea of having not just like a regular theater, creating new type of theater that involves the audience, that becomes more interactive in a sense, that allows us to, as the audience, and allows us as actors and performers to get deeper in the psyche of the human mind. You know, that's I bet in 10 years you have a lot of moments like that. That's very powerful, very valuable moments that you experience that will help you in the future, and just like already made you who you are, and understand the world and people
absolutely
on a much deeper level.
Yes.
What is the best investment that you made in yourself as an actor, looking back?
I'd say two things, right? I think I would like to separate this answer in two halves, because school was a huge deal for me. But it was a huge deal for me, not because so much of the skills, even though they were so important, right? The technique and the skills, but because of the community aspect of school. Again, having my classmates be such incredible people who we all were rooting for each other so much, and have the teachers be so invested in us as people, not just as actors, right? And it was like an emotional education, not just... I always said that my acting classes were classes on how to be a better human. I truly believe that. It was all about empathy and about knowing yourself and listening to the other and being there for the other. So I said, like, anybody who wants to just take classes on how to be better with people, take acting classes. And so that was so important. So that investment was absolutely 100% worth it. In addition to everything I learned. But sometimes, not everybody, gets to go to school or gets to go to acting school. And I'd say this is half, because now that I'm working, I rarely get to go to classes, right? I rarely get to... It's hard in a city like New York, it's expensive and you're very busy trying to make a living, and it's hard to invest in yourself time-wise and financially, right? But if you... So this is my biggest takeaway. If you create a community in which you can create and you can continue to feed that creative part of yourself, whether it's a writers group, which I've started with my friends, or a theater company that you're starting with your workshopping stuff, or you get together at someone's house to share, to do monologues, to do scenes, I'd say that's the most important part. Investing in yourself is, with the resources that you have, find a way to always be doing what you're here for. Because if you move to New York to pursue an artistic life and then you let everything else overwhelm it, then why are you even here? You would have a much easier time just having a regular job someplace else where it's not as expensive, right? So I think it's so important to find like-minded people, like I started saying about you and Numena, like-minded people who are gonna put in the work so that you stay motivated through all the work and all the hardships. So I think investment is finding your people and committing to doing your thing with them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And it's so much easier if you have a community of people to do that with than just yourself, I think. Yeah.
Community and commitment. Yeah. That's like the best lesson that you can share. Yeah. That's to everyone. And especially in LA, it's so important to have the community because you need to put extra work to actually start that community, because here people kind of like separated by the area where they live. If they live too far away from you, then it's really hard for them to be part of some kind of community, unless it's via Zoom or like online.
You brought up Zoom, right? Because I do think and people might complain about the auditions via Zoom and all that, but I do think if that's what you have, why not? Thank goodness for Zoom, right? It helped us so much through the pandemic, and still does. I mean, what you and I are doing right now, right? So thank goodness for that, because it is a resource. Yeah.
Otherwise, you need to buy a ticket to come to LA, or I need to buy a ticket to come to New York.
Exactly.
Record.
Which is hard, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And there's all other technical things that needs to be considered as well when you do it in person, but online is so much easier. And sometimes I feel like online you can even be more honest, because you kind of feel like you're still by yourself, even though there's a screen, but you still kind of can dive into your thoughts deeper and without feeling judged, in a sense, or feeling observed. Better word.
I know what you mean. I think there's, and it's different for each person, but I think there is a level of, I'm in my own space, right? There's like a bubble. The separation provides like a buffer that it's like, it's funny because in auditions or in self-tapes or something, you can't see me below here. So if I need to be placing my hand on my stomach as a way to relax myself, or if my fingers are fidgeting, you can't tell, right? Which is one of the benefits of, I could be wearing no shoes, things like that. So I do think it has
or
some
sitting in your underwear
to make you feel exactly. So it has some advantages to it to make you feel comfortable. Yeah, for sure.
So let's look at all of the projects that you've done so far, apart from the Village Playback Theater, like individual projects, plays, films, TV perhaps. What are the ones that stand out, or maybe some stories from those projects that you can share?
I think there's an area of me which is, again, very much with this philosophy of like, don't wait for things to happen. Just make them yourself with what you have, and don't wait for it to be perfect. It's kind of like this thing, like we have to wait until we get the money or until we have the time. It's like, listen, it's going to be very hard for the time to be perfect, right? So I knew right away, as soon as I graduated, that there were certain dream roles or plays that I wanted to have in my life, that I was like, I got to play that role, and I'm not going to wait until someone to produce that show and cast me in it. I'm just going to do it, right? So with my friend, just for a weekend, I bought the rights for 2 plays at separate, some years apart, but they were 2 of my favorite plays. And I was like, I cannot die without having played these characters. So I just bought the rights for a weekend, booked this very small theater, 30 seats, 40 seats, and I got to, but it was like a dream come true. Just like I've played 2 of my favorite characters because I decided to, and I think it was very just, I want everybody to see this. It's not about making the money back. And I found a very interesting strategy, which is I did like a pay what you can, pay what you wish, just come see the show. And I found that people, if they liked it at the end, they actually paid more than they would have paid if you said like a $25 ticket or $30. And people might have been like, I don't know, I'd rather save to see a Broadway show or whatever. So if you made accessible for people, and it's something I've maintained, if you made it accessible, it's like, pay if you can afford $1, that's fine. And then by the end, when you said like, if you want to support us, make some, and people actually invested more than they would have. So it's funny how that works. But those 2 plays were Venus in Fur by David Ives and Isaac's Eye by Lucas Nath. And it was just incredible, right? It's like dream roles, rehearsal, getting to do them. So I'm so glad that was self-produced. And I think the other thing that really stands out is starting my own production company with my friend Alexandra Gomez at the end of 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, when we were like, we're done with waiting. We want to be in charge of the projects we want to create, and also change the culture for the better. Because, you know, the industry culture can be quite objectifying, if you know what I mean, in that we're seen as, you know, like the cattle calls of just like, there's a million yous out there, and you should ever be so lucky to be in this room, and you should be on your knees thanking, because there's a million Federicos out there, and you're not that special, you know, kind of thing, kind of. And then it's like this, like the cliche of the acting school, which I did not have that experience, but of just like, I'm like yelling at you, and I'm being tough on you because I care about you. I don't know if I'm crazy about that, right? I don't think you're able to do your best work like that. So we wanted to construct a culture that is what I had, which is uplifting people and building on top of relationships so that the work can be the best it can be. So it's been exciting. It's been exciting to be working with like-minded people who have the same values, who have the same interests, and we're working on some very exciting things together. So, but the gift is to work with people who have a similar sensitivity to you, and who have similar priorities. Yeah.
Do you have like an audition process to find that sensitivity?
You know, what's been very helpful and how we've built our roster of people is I keep track. It's one of my favorite things about being in shows and films is keeping a little black book, right? Of like, oh, that person's really good. Like, I really liked how they worked. Like for me, number one, and I mean this, sure, talent is important, but for me, the number one thing is if the person is someone you like to be around, and it's someone who is conducive to a great working environment, and you're going to feel relaxed with that person, you're going to feel open with that person, they're good people. To me, that's number one. That's the most important thing. And then it's about talent and about, you know, professional and all that. But so I've kept this list of people that really make an impact on me, or that caught my eye whenever I go see a show, whenever I act with someone, whenever I take note. And so I keep their contact and I stay in touch. And so we've managed to build, we have a roster of about 50 people. And some of them started in social media, right? Just reaching out like, hey, your project looks so interesting. Could we talk? Could we, right? So this is how you start finding you. I would say keep track of the people who make an impact on you and invite those people, right? Because it's based on connection, and it's based on an impact that they already have, rather than an audition process, which sometimes you have to do. But it's difficult because there's a lot of surprises, right? When you start working with someone and you're like, maybe they're not the most professional, maybe they're not on time, maybe they have an attitude, right? So all those things you have to discover. Personally, I always like to work with people who I have some sense of already. Not to say that I'm close to working with new people, but I do like to have a sense of like, I think we're on the same page, right? So for me, audition process would ideally include a cup of coffee and talking about life, not just about the project, because that way you get a sense of who this person is, I think.
So I guess your audition process is inviting someone for a cup of coffee.
Sometimes, and I'll do that. I'll go see a show, and you never know, right? I'll go see a show and it's like, what a talented performer. And I'm like, the show moved me so much. Would you be willing to talk to me about it? I have so much thoughts about your show, and then you can start a friendship like that, or you can start a working relationship like that, So I do think it's important to reach out to people you admire, and you never know who's gonna respond.
Let's move to the dark side a little bit. Let's talk about AI. Okay. So what are your thoughts on AI in the film industry, and or even theater industry and like entertainment industry? And have you tried any of the apps yet, or using on regular basis?
You know what? I have to admit that I have nothing against it per se. I think it's counterproductive. I think we all know it's here to stay, and it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. So might as well get on board with it, right? And I think just try to protect people's work as much as possible. I think we do need the legislation. I think personally, I don't like to overuse it. Like, say I'm writing grants or applications, and most people now they said like, well, this is the thought I want to communicate. Give me a paragraph, right? And that's fine. It's so helpful. I personally feel like I'm exercising the brain if it comes from me, right? So that ability, I do think it's like a brain workout of like me having to express from zero why I want to do this project and why you should invest in me. I do think it's good practice just for me. So I haven't used it in that way. I think the closest I've come to use it is like I'm in a hurry and my phone, can you translate this entire paragraph that I already wrote in Spanish to English and then just make sure it's edits? I think that's the closest I've come to it. But as far as writing scripts and all that, I'm not a fan of that, for sure. I think to give an AI the ability to write a script when there's people who want to make that their life's work and to take that away from them, I don't think that's cool. Will it happen? Yes. Will it be unavoidable? Yes. So it's going to be very interesting to see how we react and support of these projects or not. I'm sure you feel this way, and a lot of people feel this way. There are some movies already and TV shows that feel like they've been written by an AI. It just feels so recycled or so. I'm sure we've already seen a couple that they've experimented with writing the scripts that way.
And it's so easy to do it now. It's so easy to do it now. It's insane. Like, you can open your messenger, there is AI there, you can ask them to write a treatment for a feature film, and boom, they write it.
Exactly.
Actually, it's not that bad. It's something that would 90% of the people will write as a starting point. Yeah, that's for sure.
So I think it can be. It's always, there's two faces, like you said, right? It can be very depressing in that it's not fair to people who spend the time writing the script, right? And this thing gets it done in half the time or less. And at the same time, AI is making some other things more democratic, right? So if you don't have the resources to pay for a design artist, or there's even the whole conversation about, it's very delicate, right? But the conversation's even about headshots for actors. They're expensive. I mean, and the photographers work hard, and their skills, they should be paid for it. But they're very expensive, and a lot of people don't have the means to pay for the headshots. So you take a picture with your phone and you ask AI to make it look professional. And it is more, it's a little bit more inclusive in a way, of people who don't have the resources. So there's ups, and I'm eager to keep learning about the pros in our industry, because right now there's such an emphasis on all the negative, and it is kind of sad. Right, of this notion that with Scarlett Johansson and they use her voice without permission, even though she said no. And so there's a lot of legislation, and I think it's going to be up to those people in power, like Scarlett Johansson and all these people who can afford to fight those battles to get legislation made. But yeah, we already know, right, that they want your likeness and they want to keep it forever and pay you the one time, and that's it. So yeah, it's gonna be something. I mean, I can't even imagine in the next 20 years, let alone 20, 10, 5. But going back to creating your community, and that no one can take that away from you, and you work in community and you do the things you want to do, hopefully that stays the same, right?
Yeah, well, we can have a whole other episode about discussing AI, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it. So let's now move on to the feature films versus TV shows. Which one do you think is better as a job, and what do you think is the future of both in United States, in Mexico, and maybe in the entire world as a whole?
Television shows, it's funny how they taken over just because of comfort, right? And it has to do so much with access. Again, access, right? Of just like I'm paying for it. Or sometimes there's amazing platforms like Tubi and Freevee, right? Where you get like the most amazing films. That's how I've been watching films recently. Like classics that I've never seen on Tubi it's free and it's amazing, right? And it's the access to all the films I've never seen in my life.
Sorry to interrupt, but this Tubi thing, it really caught
No.
my eye recently when I visited New York. Because I have one actor I interviewed for a podcast. He had a movie that was that he made and made to Tubi. And I was like, what is Tubi? There is like a lot of commercials about Tubi. And it's like Tubi everywhere in New York. Like, what is Tubi? I need to check it out. And then I check it out. And
yeah. And you know what? Because we tend to see like, oh, these little platforms, right? Everybody has a platform and they want... But Constantine, like they have a lot of the best films in history, right? It's not like some platform. It's like there's really good content.
Yeah,
you know.
I didn't know how big it was.
That's yeah. It's recent, right? But I spent most of my watching hours on Tubi.
That's
right. More so than Netflix or HBO or.
That's the craziest thing I've heard.
I promise you, go through their catalog and you'll find like top-notch films that you've never watched, and it's not like a few, it's a lot. All this to say that when you're going to book a television show, it's the excitement of this could go on for a while, right? It's the closest actors get to a steady job if you get renewed for seasons. And we know nothing is for certain, right? I mean, you think you got your big break and the show gets a season and gets canceled immediately after, right? Or it doesn't get, or you shoot the pilot and it doesn't get picked up. So I think like with everything in acting, you just have to get really good at letting go. At like, yes, big break, but take it for what it is. Be appreciative of it while it lasts, and then move on. The future. Oh, that's such a big question. It's so interesting. I think what's been catching my eye recently in auditions is that you're seeing a lot of vertical short film, or vertical film. Which it says a lot, right? Of just like now we're thinking not just in bits and pieces of social media, but in longer content that's vertical. It's so interesting. Yeah, I don't think one's better than the other, because you could get booked for a television show and you're there for a couple hours, right, for a non-speaking role, or you book a bigger thing in film. So I don't think necessarily one is better than the other, right? But I do think the future of television is looking a little bit more promising than the future of film. There seems to be a lot more there. And I think the platforms are learning that it's not enough to just content, right? Which hopefully it's good news for this overuse of the AI of just like, give us 30,000 scripts. They're noticing that people are not reacting good to that, right? Disney recently said something about, we learned our lesson, we're going to prioritize quality over quantity kind of thing. And I think they're starting to learn that for a few years, platforms just wanted piles of content. And they're starting to learn that it's not about piles of content. It's about having good content. So that's good news, right? It is good news for everybody, I think.
That's why I like Apple TV Plus. They have really good content. Pretty much everything that they make is really good. I mean, it's good and they released, and some of them are great.
Maybe Netflix did a little bit more of that, where it's just like, and Apple TV is, I think, more selective. Yeah.
Now, let me challenge your creativity a little bit, if you don't mind.
Of course, always up for it.
All right. So, if you were an extraterrestrial from a perfect world where everything is organized and balanced, and now visiting our world with all of its issues, what would be the one thing that you'd fix?
The big questions. I think it's just the first thing that came to mind. Getting rid of this notion of us versus them, because I feel all of our problems stem from that separation of like, I'm here, you're there. That I think that's the origin of all of our discontent. And it applies to the world too, right? Like, nature's here, I'm here, I own you, like, or some people are here, I'm above them. All that disparity of just like, you and I are not in the same plane. I am somewhat superior to you. That's if that were a button, in this fantasy world of the extraterrestrials, that illusion could be broken and see that we're on the same plane.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything at all? Promote something, share new projects, upcoming projects?
Things like Village Playback Theater we're like year round, and like the Toy Museum, we're year round, which you mentioned in the introduction and things like that. But right now, more exciting to be going back in film as producer specifically for my production company. So we're working on an exciting short film that it's very much a labor of like guerrilla filmmaking, right? Of just like with what we have, and we're all wearing a million different hats, and I'm like doing the slate while I hold the light, right? And I also reading the lines of the actor who couldn't be there because they have a million jobs, so that's been exciting again, because I'm getting to work with people that I want to work with, which in all honesty is sometimes better than being hired, because you don't know what you're gonna get, right? And you're just there to, and if you get lucky, you meet good people. But this is by our own choice, working with people we like, and that's been a very special gift. So I'm excited to continue to do that with this short film and upcoming films. And that's the truth is the same is truth for a parody of Hamlet, that it's turned out to be a very nice, successful project that continues to kind of like gain new life. So I'm excited about that too, and to keep expanding it. And it's been exciting to have a nice response of something that's been overdone, frankly. But it's exciting to realize that those classics are classics because they have sort of like endless life, and they have endless interpretations, and they have room for so many different visions, right? And that's why they keep making them. I mean, this year alone, you probably read the news, but there's like 4 Romeo and Juliets coming, and again, we're like, oh my goodness, like that's been done a million times. How many more Romeo and Juliet? But if you do it with something to say, if the person is really invested, they always hit, right? There's one coming to Broadway right now with Rachel Zegler, and there's one in the UK with Tom Holland, and there's another. But I think it's not about the what, it's about how. So yeah, and I think the only other thing is, again, people, I highly encourage everybody to find your people, to and make a commitment with them, to yourself, to your craft. But it's always easier when you find people to do it with, who are going to push you forth.
Yes. Obsession of the week. This is the question to kind of relax from the tension of those deep questions that I've been torturing you during the episode.
Yes.
It can be anything. Brand of your motorcycle, I don't know. It can be a book, it can be a movie. For me this week, I'm obsessed with crystals. It's like spiritual crystals. I've never been obsessed with them at all, and all of a sudden I got really into them. Like rocks, yeah. And particularly I got myself the citrine crystal because it matches my astrology and stuff. But I usually not really into it. I was just really into the benefits of it, because people sharing so many benefits of having crystal that matches your energy, and decided to try.
That's awesome. Well, you know what? I don't know if it's because it's recent. This is just yesterday, so that's what comes to mind. I haven't become obsessed with it yet, but because it's related to what you just said, I'm gonna choose it. I'm a fan of Jennifer Lopez. I love her, J-Lo, good old J-Lo, and it's such a figure, right? People have a lot of things to say. It's kind of like I either love her or don't love her, or many things. You say what you say about her career. But yesterday, I watched a double feature of her self-produced musical film, which is an hour. It's all of the songs in her album in the shape of a surreal musical film.
No.
And the documentary behind that film. And the reason why I say of her what you will, the reason why I admire her so much is because she is that go-getter. She is that, nobody believes in me, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to produce my damn film that no platform wanted to buy and no one understood. And people are calling me silly for investing my own money. And I don't need to make this film, but I want to make this film. And it's what my heart is telling me to do. And I'm excited about it. And that's enough. And people are going to call me reckless, and it was such a encouraging thing because the film Constantine, the film, I watched the documentary first and then the film.
Yeah.
But she is walking a fine line of making fun of herself. She knows what people say of her. She knows the image that Hollywood has of her, and she's commenting on that and she's making fun of that. And at the same time, is very open-heartedly saying, like, I know you'll call me corny and I'm going to say these things, and I know you're going to make fun of me for saying these things, and I'm still going to say them. So I think there's something, I think that's part of why I admire her, because she gets so much shit, for lack of a better word. People really love to just like throw things at her, and she's doing her thing, you know. So yeah, it inspired me in that way. So I think that'll call out my obsession of the week.
Nice.
J-Lo and her resourcefulness. Yeah.
Have you heard her most recent movie, Atlas?
I haven't yet. It just came out a couple days ago. So
I guess you're up for a treat.
She's such a yes. Okay. Well, it's AI too, right? It's about. I thought it's so interesting how she's trying to romanticize AI, like as a positive thing. Apparently, right? Like as
I actually watched it. I actually watched it last night, and I have this little channel on Instagram where I put movies that I rate 5 out of 5, and I have like a rating system 1 to 5. So this movie I would rate 3 out of 5, which is not bad. It's not bad. It's like, it's pretty solid movie. It's not like something crazy, but it's
of
solid.
course.
No.
You know what? I think what I respect, I think she knows that, right? She knows what she's doing. It's not like she's expecting to do like 2001: A Space Odyssey. She knows this is a Netflix film for your average viewer. They know what people expect from her. She knows what she's doing, right? I feel like people tend to be like, oh, J-Lo thinks she's doing this great. It's like, she knows what it is. She knows the type of movie she's doing, right? She knows the purpose. So I appreciate that. And I thought it was very interesting that the premise was like, oh, it's a friendship story, but it's AI. So I thought that was kind of like new. And it has some good actors in it. So yeah, I'll be definitely checking it out. So I'm glad to hear that you rated it a solid 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Federico, thank you so much for coming in today to Rumikay Talks. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Constantine. Thank you for your provocative questions. They're food for thought. Your creativity, and for making space for talking about things we love.